Hey everyone, are we good? All right. So we're gonna read chapters 4 and 5 today of Holes. I sent out cards to everybody. I'm not sure if anybody got any. I received one phone call today, which was kind of good. So I know that this person got it, and they're later on in the alphabet. So I'm hoping those who were A through D got their cards, and I'd like to know if you guys got them or not. So anyways, we're gonna go ahead and read chapters 4 and 5. I hope you guys, my hair is kind of wearing a hat all day, but you know what though, at this point, who really cares? You know what I mean? So, all right, and then also talked to Mr. Harris about this book, and he said it's a movie on Disney Plus. So if you have Disney Plus, don't watch it until I've finished reading the book though. Or if you've read it already and then I give you permission to read it or watch the movie. But if you haven't seen the book or if you haven't seen the movie or read the book, wait till I'm done, okay? And we're gonna kind of bust along through this. So we're gonna read chapters 4 and 5 today. So I might even actually upload this video today, but it'll definitely be up by Tuesday, okay? All right, so now we know that Stanley's arrived at Camp Green Lake and he's looking around and he doesn't see a lake and he doesn't see anything that's green, okay? Stanley felt somewhat dazed as the guard unlocked his handcuffs and let him off the bus. He'd been on the bus for over 8 hours. "Be careful," the bus driver said as Stanley walked down the steps. Stanley wasn't sure if the bus driver meant for him to be careful going down the steps or if he was telling him to be careful at Camp Green Lake. "Thanks for the ride," he said. His mouth was dry and his throat hurt. He stepped onto the hard, dry dirt. There was a band of sweat around his wrist where the handcuff had been. The land was barren and desolate. He could see a few rundown buildings and some tents. Farther away, there was a cabin beneath 2 tall trees. Those 2 trees were the only plant life he could see. There weren't even weeds. The guard led Stanley to a small building. A sign on front said, "You are entering Camp Green Lake Juvenile Correctional Facility." Next to it was another sign which declared that it was a violation of the Texas Penal Code to bring guns, explosives, weapons, drugs, or alcohol onto the premises. As Stanley read the sign, he couldn't help but think, well, duh. The guard led Stanley into the building where he felt the welcome relief of air conditioning. A man was sitting with his feet up on a desk. He turned his head when Stanley and the guard entered, but otherwise didn't move. Even though he was inside, he wore sunglasses and a cowboy hat. He also held a can of soda, and the sight of it made Stanley even more aware of his own thirst. He waited until the bus guard gave the man some papers to sign. "That's a lot of sunflower seeds," the bus guard said. Stanley noticed a burlap sack filled with sunflower seeds on the floor next to the desk. "I quit smoking last month," said the man in the cowboy hat. He had a tattoo of a rattlesnake on his arm, and as he signed his name, the snake's rattle seemed to wiggle. "I used to smoke a pack a day. Now I eat a sack of these every week." The guard laughed. There must have been a small refrigerator behind his desk because the man in the cowboy hat produced 2 more cans of soda. For a second, Stanley hoped that one might be for him, but the man gave one to the guard and said the other was for the driver. 9 hours here, and now 9 hours back," the guard grumbled. "What a day." Stanley thought about the long, miserable bus ride and felt a little sorry for the guard and the bus driver. The man in the cowboy hat spit sunflower seed shells onto a wastepaper basket. Then he walked around the desk to Stanley. "My name is Mr. Sir," he said. "Whenever you speak to me, you must call me by my name. Is that clear?" Stanley hesitated. Yes, Mr. Sir," he said, though he couldn't imagine that was really the man's name. "You're not in the Girl Scouts anymore," Mr. Sir said. Stanley had to remove his clothes in front of Mr. Sir, who made sure he wasn't hiding anything. He was then given 2 sets of towels and clothes. Each set consisted of a long-sleeve orange jumpsuit, an orange t-shirt, and yellow socks. Stanley wasn't sure if the socks had been yellow originally. He was also given white sneakers, an orange cap, and a canteen made of heavy plastic, which unfortunately was empty. The cap had a piece of cloth sewn on the back of it for neck protection. Stanley got dressed. The clothes smelled like soap. Mr. Sir told him he should wear 1 set to work in and 1 set for relaxation. Laundry was done every 3 days. On that day, his work clothes would be washed. Then the other set would become his work clothes and he would get clean clothes to wear while resting. You are to dig one hole each day, including Saturdays and Sundays. Each hole must be 5 feet deep and 5 feet in every direction. Your shovel is your measuring stick. Breakfast is served at 4:30. Stanley must have looked surprised because Mr. Sir went on to explain that they started early to avoid the hardest part of the day. No one is going to babysit you, he added. The longer it takes you to dig, the longer you will be out in the sun. If you dig up anything interesting, you are to report it to me or any other counselor. When you finish, the rest of the day is yours. Stanley nodded to show he understood. This isn't a Girl Scout camp, said Mr. Sir. He checked Stanley's backpack and allowed him to keep it. Then he led Stanley outside into the blazing heat. Take a good look around you, Mr. Sir said. What do you see? Stanley looked out across the vast wasteland. The air seemed thick with heat and dirt. Not much, he said, then hastily added, Mr. Sir. Mr. Sir laughed. You see any guard towers? No. How about an electric fence? No, Mr. Sir. There is no fence at all, is there? No, Mr. Sir. You want to run away? Mr. Sir asked him. Stanley looked back, unsure what he meant. If you want to run away, go ahead, start running. I'm not going to stop you. Stanley didn't know what kind of game Mr. Sir was playing. I see you looking at my gun. Don't worry, I'm not going to shoot you. This is for yellow-spotted lizards. I wouldn't waste a bullet on you. I'm not going to run away. Good thinking, said Mr. Sir. Nobody runs away from here. We don't need a fence. Know why? Because we've got the only water for 100 miles. You want to run away? You'll be buzzard food in 3 days. Stanley could see some kids dressed in orange and carrying shovels dragging themselves toward the tents. You thirsty? Asked Mr. Sir. Yes, Mr. Sir, Stanley said gratefully. Well, you better get used to it. You're going to be thirsty for the next 18 months. All right, so now we're on chapter 5. It's only a couple pages, so we'll go ahead and start. There were 6 large gray tents, and each one had a black letter on it, A, B, C, D, E, or F. The first 5 tents were for the campers. The counselors slept in F. Stanley was signed to D tent. Mr. Pandosky was his counselor. My name is easy to remember, said Mr. Pandosky as he shook hands with Stanley just outside the tent. 3 easy words. Pen, dance, key. Mr. Sir returned to the office. Mr. Pendansky was younger than Mr. Sir, and not nearly as scary looking. The top of his head was shaved so close it was almost bald, but his face was covered in thick, curly black beard. His nose was badly sunburned. Mr. Sir isn't really so bad, said Mr. Pendansky. He's just been in a bad mood ever since he quit smoking. The person you've got to worry about is the warden. There's really only one rule at Camp Garden Lake. Don't upset the warden. Stanley nodded as if he understood. I want you to know, Stanley, that I respect you, Mr. Pendansky said. I understand you've made some bad mistakes in your life. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. But everyone makes mistakes. You may have done some bad things, but that doesn't mean you're a bad kid. Stanley nodded. It seemed pointless to try and tell his counselor that he was innocent. He figured that everyone probably said that. He didn't want Mr. Pendansky to think he had a bad attitude. I'm going to turn your life around, said his counselor, but you're going to have to help too. Can I count on your help? Yes, sir, Stanley said. Mr. Pendansky said, good, and patted Stanley on the back. 2 boys, each carrying a shovel, were coming across the compound. Mr. Pendansky called to them, Rex, Alan, want you to come say hello to Stanley. He's the newest member of our team. The boys glanced wearily at Stanley. They were dripping with sweat, and their faces were so dirty that it took Stanley a moment to notice that one kid was white and the other black. What happened to Barf Bag? Asked the black kid. Lewis is still in the hospital, said Mr. Pendansky. He won't be returning. He told the boys to come shake Stanley's hand and introduce themselves like gentlemen. Hi, the white kid grunted. That's Alan, said Mr. Pendansky. My name's not Alan, it's Squid, and that's X-Ray. Hey, said X-Ray. He smiled and shook Stanley's hand. He wore glasses, but they were so dirty that Stanley wondered how he could see out of them. Mr. Pendansky told Alan to go to the rec hall and bring the other boys to meet Stanley. Then he led them inside the tent. There were 7 cots, each one less than 2 feet from the one next to it. Which was Lewis's cot? Mr. Pendansky asked. Barf Bag slept right here, said X-Ray, kicking at one of the beds. All right, Stanley, that'll be yours, said Mr. Pendansky. Stanley looked at the cot and nodded. He wasn't particularly thrilled about sleeping in the same cot that had been used by somebody named Barf Bag. 7 crates were stacked in 2 piles at one side of the tent. The open end of the crates faced outward. Stanley put his backpack, change of clothes, and towel in what used to be Barfbag's crate. It was at the bottom of the stack that had 3 in it. Squid returned with 4 other boys. The first 3 were introduced by Mr. Pendanski as Jose, Fedor, and Ricky. They called themselves Magnet, Armpit, and Zigzag. They all have nicknames, explained Mr. Pendanski. However, I prefer to use the names their parents gave them, the names that society will recognize them by when they return home to become useful and hard-working members of society. It ain't just a nickname, X-Ray told Mr. Pendanski. He tapped the rim of his glasses. I can see inside you, Mom. You got a big, fat heart. The last boy either didn't have a real name or else he didn't have a nickname. Both Mr. Pendanski and X-Ray called him Zero. You know why his name's Zero? Asked Mr. Pendanski. Because there's nothing inside his head. He smiled and playfully shook Zero's shoulder. Zero said nothing. And that's Mom, the boy said. Mr. Pendanski smiled at him. If it makes you feel better to call me Mom, Fedor, go ahead and call me Mom. He turned to Stanley. If you have questions, Fedor will help you. You got that, Fedor? I'm depending on you. Fedor spit a thin line of saliva between his teeth, causing some of the other boys to complain about the need to keep their homes sanitary. You are all new here once, said Mr. Pendanski, and you all know what it feels like. I'm counting on every one of you to help Stanley. Stanley looked at the ground. Mr. Pendanski left the tent, and soon the other boys began to file out as well, taking their towels and change of clothes with them. Stanley was relieved to be left alone, but he was so thirsty he felt as if he would die if he didn't get something to drink soon. Hey, Fedor, he said, going after him. Do you know where I can fill my canteen? Fedor whirled and grabbed Stanley by his collar. My name is not Theodore, he said. It's Armpit. And he threw Stanley to the ground. Stanley stared up at him, terrified. There's a water spigot on the wall of the shower stall. Thanks, Armpit, said Stanley. As he watched the boy turn and walk away, he couldn't for the life of him figure out why anyone would want to be called Armpit. In a way, it made him feel a little better about having to sleep in a cot that had been used by somebody named Barfbag. Maybe it was a term of respect. All right, so I don't really have a question for you to look at today. I guess to me, it's like, go ahead and look something up that you find interesting. I'm going to leave this up to you. I don't have my sports stuff on today. So just look up something that you find interesting.
How about Texas? That's where he is.
Yeah, we could do that. You can, tell you what, why don't you name the baseball teams that are located in Texas? And I think there's 2. Yeah, there's 2 of them.
There's 2.
I think there's 2. Tell me what baseball teams are in Texas. And if you want, tell me what basketball teams are in Texas too. So your choice is basketball teams in Texas and baseball teams in Texas too. Okay, since he is in Texas. Good call, Mrs. Chen. All right. Make sure you're able to go on Google Classroom. Make sure you're able to download that. Or maybe sure you can look at all the assignments that I put on there and leave comments on there. Mr. Harris is going to be part of that group too, so he's going to be giving science lessons and stuff. So anyways, I really hope you guys are doing well. I sincerely miss each and every single one of you guys. It was nice to get some correspondence today. I responded to you guys. Nice to get a phone call of a guardian of one of the students. So I do miss you guys. You guys were a special class. And 5th grade, I know Miss Grykowski and Miss Rodriguez are having you guys do a lot of work today. So hope you guys are doing well as well. And Miss KJ's class. Love you guys. Bye.